Hi, Dr. Platt. How are you today?
Well, I'm good, thank you. I hope you're doing okay.
Always getting through the summer. It's almost over.
Okay. Yeah. So what are we talking about today? Okay.
Well, today is a big topic, which a lot of people are surprised about ADHD and how you can cure it. And I think it affects a lot of people, whether they're hyperactive or they have attention deficit. And I think the term ADHD is thrown out a lot in schools for kids. I would love for you to share your information on this topic because a lot of our clients, not clients, but customers that go with your protocol are amazed on how quickly it can cure. So first of all, I wanted to describe what is ADHD.
Okay, well, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation. It's very often regarded as a learning disorder, but the bottom line of ADHD, it's not a learning disorder, it's an interest disorder. In other words, children or adults with ADHD, they'll focus on things if they're interested, but if they're not interested, they will not focus. Um, Now, they basically have theoretically three different types of ADHD. Now, what used to be called ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is now called hyperactive impulsive type.
Hmm.
I don't know what I don't know what they changed, but so and then and then what used to be called ADD, or attention deficit disorder, is now called the inattentive type. And then you have what's
Interesting.
called a combined type, which is a mixture of the two. But basically, children that have ADHD, the hyperactive type ones, these are the kids that can't sit still, they interrupt in class, whatever. Um, and then the children that are called right now the inattentive type, which used to be called the ADD, which means had trouble focusing, but they weren't hyperactive. Um, these are the children and adults who I have determined are very creative type people. And always keep in mind that creative people have the most adrenaline. So so that's and they estimate there are about 11% of children have ADHD. I think it's higher, frankly. And as you know, I wrote a book called Adrenaline Dominance, and this is actually the only book ever written that talks about ADHD in terms of adrenaline. Um, but I divide conditions into the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the only condition that I put into the good category was ADHD. And the reason for that is that the most intelligent, successful, creative people in the world have ADHD. So how bad can it be?
Is
Okay.
that because they're using a lot of brain activity because they're creative and they're constantly creating and they're using a lot of brain fuel? I don't
Well,
know. Why is that? Why are creative people more dubbed to have ADHD? Or why are people that have ADHD are mostly creative?
okay. Well, creativity actually uses up a lot of fuel in the brain,
Right.
and that's basically the bottom line here. Um, and when the brain runs out of fuel, then the body puts out adrenaline to raise fuel levels back up again.
Got it.
And like I say, they estimate about 11% of children have ADHD. I think it's much higher than that.
Hmm.
Um, and so moving on to um, from what is ADHD to what causes ADHD.
Right.
Okay, again, it is my observation that it's caused by excess adrenaline. And there are a number of reasons why I've come to this conclusion, because I seem to be the only person in this country that talks about adrenaline and ADHD.
Right.
Um, But you have to remember that adrenaline is a very powerful hormone, but it's also a neurotransmitter. And adrenaline is the neurotransmitter that makes people intelligent. And believe it or not, people with ADHD are usually very intelligent. They may have trouble focusing, but they're intelligent. And and the thing about creativity, again, that requires a lot of energy from the brain.
Right.
And again, so you can see why these people are putting out a lot of adrenaline because they keep on running out of fuel. Um, so so my suspicion is that excess adrenaline is the cause of ADHD. And what sort of helps promote this idea is that when you approach ADHD from the standpoint of excess adrenaline and you block and lower the adrenaline levels, ADHD disappears. So,
Wow.
So
So if you're
okay.
a parent and you have a child that's highly intelligent and or creative, they're using a lot of brain fuel and adrenaline is surging to raise levels of insulin to feed the brain. I mean, I know this from reading your book. So I just wanted to like dial it down for parents why that is happening. If you have a child you're considering putting them on medication or you have them on medication, it could be simply a very simple cure to block adrenaline rather than have them go on this medication.
Well, the medication that they use for ADHD doesn't actually block adrenaline. Um, the medicine by itself, if a child does not have ADHD, the medicine would give them ADHD because the medications are pure adrenaline. Ritalin, Strattera, Adderall, doesn't matter. They're all the same. They all increase adrenaline. And what that does, it actually numbs the brain and slows it down. Um, but
So it gives
and
appearance of slowing them down, but it actually is putting fuel on the fire, really.
Well, yeah, well, it's increasing their adrenaline levels, which is never good because they already have a lot of adrenaline to begin with. And that's why, adrenaline, again, is a very powerful hormone. They're giving them adrenaline. And that's why sudden death is one of the side effects of these drugs. But in this country and with their FDA, killing children with drugs is an acceptable side effect. I don't consider it acceptable, but
Yeah.
that drug companies control this, they control this country and this medicine.
So
But
Doc,
in any
how
event,
do you block adrenaline? How do you cure, if you're a parent or you're an adult, how do you block adrenaline from
okay,
ADHD happening?
okay. Well, the whole approach to illness or conditions, whatever, the only way to eliminate it or cure it is to treat the cause of it.
Mhm.
And and that's just something again that is not done. Doctors do not treat the cause of illness. They give out band-aids. So all the stimulants that they give they're all band-aids. But if you want to treat the cause, then you have to treat the reason why the body is putting out adrenaline. Now, what makes it relatively simple, there's only two reasons why the body releases adrenaline. One is if you're in danger. Remember, it's a fight or flight hormone.
Right.
But that's a very rare reason why the body puts out adrenaline. The other reason why the body puts out adrenaline is to raise sugar levels for the brain. And people have heard me say this before, the brain uses more sugar than any other tissue in the body. And anytime the body detects that the brain
Mhm.
is running out of fuel, glucose, it puts out adrenaline to raise glucose levels. Now, this is a survival concern. You may have heard of people that fall asleep when they're driving. That's because of a low blood sugar. And I'm sure, if you want to go back to caveman times, when man was out hunting, and if he fell asleep under a tree because, again, a low
Right.
blood sugar, he would be very vulnerable to animals that are
Right.
roaming around. Okay, so from a survival standpoint, the body always wants to make sure the brain has enough fuel. So if understanding this, if people provide the fuel that the brain requires, then the body doesn't need to use adrenaline to do it.
So
Now the
diet
brain
is
uses
important too.
exactly.
Okay.
It's exceedingly important.
Right.
And so the brain uses two different fuels. One is glucose. Now the best sources of glucose for the brain actually come from vegetables. Now, you don't think of vegetables being high in sugar, but they are carbohydrates and they do break down into glucose.
Exactly. Mhm.
But what's beneficial about vegetables is that they don't produce a lot of insulin. And because insulin lowers blood sugar and defeats the purpose. You know, candy and soda are great sources of glucose, but they stimulate a lot of insulin,
Right.
which defeats the, okay. So the other fuel, which is probably even more important than glucose for the brain, are ketones. And, you know, people have heard of a ketogenic diet, which I don't recommend because it's a very difficult diet to accomplish.
Very
But
hard to stay on, yeah.
okay, so basically you can get ketones directly from coconut oil or MCT oil, which is derived from coconut oil. Now,
Mhm.
coconut oil is great for cooking because it has a very high heat threshold. And the thing about MCT oil, it has no flavor, so it can be added to anything.
Right.
Okay, so basically, if people provide the right fuel for the brain, the
Mhm.
only other thing they have to add is a 5% progesterone cream. Now, 5% means that each pump is 50 milligrams, and that's the exact strength you need to block adrenaline.
Right.
So, so if you have a child with ADHD and you put them on the right meal plan, you know, with the, the vegetables and the coconut oil, the MCT oil throughout the day, because the brain uses a fuel about every 3 to 4 hours, and give them progesterone cream, literally within 24 hours, the ADHD could be gone. 24
Wow.
hours.
Wow. I
Um,
mean, now getting kids to eat vegetables, that's another thing. I mean, maybe they could put vegetables in smoothies or sneak it in somehow. I have a nephew who's 6, and it's like insane how
well, well,
anything green on his plate, not even a piece of parsley.
well,
Uh,
some kids will eat sweet potatoes, and
mhm.
with sweet potatoes, what I recommend instead of baking them, slice them up and fry them in coconut oil, and that's a really good side dish.
Yeah.
And that's something you could actually give a child to eat before they go to sleep, because the thing about adrenaline, it peaks at 2:30 in the morning.
Right.
And why that time is because that's about the time the brain runs out of fuel completely.
Or you can make
So
sweet potato chips, and bake them.
I'll leave that up to you. You're in charge of the chips now. Okay.
Sounds good. Well, that sounds great. I know that we have the adrenaline dominance meal plan that is relatively new. I think we published it last year. It's on the website. We include, actually, we created a bundle with the adrenaline dominance book, and which has received, is it 6 literary rewards? I think 6, 5 or 6. It's on the website. And a bottle of progesterone cream and the meal plan. We have those all 3 together in a nice bundle, discounted bundle. But we also sell them separately. So if you are listening to this and you're a current customer and you already have the cream and already have the book, we also have a digital format of the adrenaline dominance book, which is really great.
So are you saying that this might be more productive than spending $5,000 at the AIM Center? You know, would they do electrical testing of the brain for $5,000? Um, anyway,
I think that
mon
it's
money would be better spent on progesterone cream and vegetables. Okay.
and in like we have talked about this before, but I think it's important to talk about on the podcast that progesterone cream is safe for children, and it is not a sex hormone. So if you have a boy and he's, you're not giving him, hormone creams that is going to change his hormone balance. Um, so that is important. I know that a lot of our customers do ask that question about, is it safe to put on babies or children? And I know that you have, what is your thought on that?
Well, it's always good to remember that when the fetus is in the womb, it gets exposed to incredibly high levels of progesterone.
Mhm.
So if the fetus can tolerate that amount of progesterone, then it's extremely safe for a baby that has colic or
Mhm.
bedwetting in children, because that's also caused by adrenaline.
Right.
All these things, and certainly teenagers with ADHD. It's very safe for children, and you're right, it will not affect their sexual orientation at all. And keep in mind, it is not a woman's hormone. Men and women have the identical hormones.
Exactly.
So
I know we get a lot of questions from men about hormones, and they don't know anything about progesterone. They're afraid, they're afraid that it's a sex hormone, and it certainly isn't.
well, actually, men stop making progesterone right around the age of 50.
Right.
And progesterone is a hormone that blocks estrogen. So now that's gone. So they have nothing to protect them from their own estradiol, and they have higher levels than women do at this point. And that's where prostate cancer comes from.
Right.
And also men start putting on weight around the middle because now they have no longer have progesterone to block insulin.
I always
So
thought that was caused from low testosterone, but it's not. It's low progesterone, not balance between estrogen. So that's interesting.
well, yeah.
Well,
So yeah, so and also men have some anger issues, believe it or not. Yeah, that's adrenaline. So
I think we should have another separate podcast on male and hormones. I think that would be really, really helpful.
okay.
But I wanted to address the fact that, being a mother, I'm not a mother, but being, if you're a mother and you have children and you have boys and, girls are having issues with ADHD, it is safe. And you're saying one pump a day is sufficient, or do you have to do it all throughout the day?
It all depends on how much adrenaline. You
Right.
cannot overdose on progesterone. You can run out of it, but you can't overdose on it. I think it's very important for mothers and fathers to realize if they have a child with ADHD, the child inherited it from one or both parents.
Right.
It always runs in families, 100% of the time.
Right.
And also, a child with ADHD grows up to be an adult with ADHD. Adult just doesn't have, adult ADHD doesn't just happen.
Right.
It's there,
Exactly. And they probably, either one of the parents would probably identify with what you're saying, because if it was inherited, then they were experiencing, basically the same thing when they were younger.
and I tell you, while we're talking about ADHD, and I mentioned about the creative type ADHDs, which they have a different name now called inattentive type ADHD. But and these are the children that have trouble focusing, but they're not hyperactive. Now, I mentioned that creative people have the most adrenaline, and keep in mind that excess adrenaline is probably the number one cause of weight gain. So, needless to say, creative type people, not only are they more prone to gaining weight because they're putting out two hormones that raise sugar levels, adrenaline and cortisol, but also for the creative type people, the ones that get into drugs and alcohol. And the reason for that, they're just trying to relax, just trying to chill out, because adrenaline is a very powerful hormone. It's a rage hormone. It's where road rage comes from. So anyway, that's just, again, my observation.
Yeah, well, it does, the dots connect. And I think that if anyone wants to, you have to pay attention to your health. You have to take control of your health, not just listen to your doctor, which is important, but you also have to take charge, because everyone is different. And you have to really, if anything, do research and ask your doctor the right questions. But I think that no one knows you more than you. And if you're experiencing ADHD and everyone is different on a certain spectrum, then it really is something you have to pay attention to. And obviously, being a parent, like you said, back to my original question, was what the dosage is. And I know that with some treatments, that you might have maybe some in the morning and maybe some at night, along with some keto and some vegetables or sweet potatoes, to help fuel the brain, but also block the adrenaline. And you sleep.
Can I add one little thing?
Absolutely.
Okay. when I was growing up, I had classic ADHD. I used to get up and walk out of class. I couldn't focus at all in school. And
Mhm.
this went on not only through high school and also through college. And it wasn't until I got into medical school that I started studying. And the difference is that I was interested in medicine, but I had no interest in anything in high school or college. Um, and that's why I'm saying that the whole thing about ADHD, it's
Mhm.
not a learning disorder, it's an interest disorder. And but people should realize that most doctors have ADHD. And I'm just, yeah.
Well,
And
oddly, you know, yesterday I was served a story on, I don't know, some group called Weird and Amazing Things, and it was about this woman named Jillian. And, knowing that we were going to do this podcast today, I shared it with you because I thought you had told me about this story, but I must have, somebody must have told it to me. I'm not sure. But the story is great. And I'm going to post it on our social media page so everybody can see it as well, along with the podcast, but I'll also put it on our social media. But Jillian was, she couldn't sit still in school, and she was dubbed a learning disorder, and they were going to decide what to do with her, and they wanted to maybe put her on medication. And they were talking to her in a separate room, and the teacher left the room but had the radio on, and it was music. When they came back in, this child was dancing all over the room, and the teacher, to her credit, realized that she had a talent and put her into music lessons, and she became the producer, a famous choreographer, and she actually was the first choreographer for Cats on Broadway. And I thought that was just a timely story. But here's a story of a kid who was extremely creative, couldn't sit still, had was dubbed with ADHD or ADD, and they were going to get ready to figure out either take her out
which,
of her class and put her in a special group or put her on medications. And here they did. She was interested in music and dancing, but she was so young. Kids can't tell you that. You have to really pay attention.
okay, the fact that she was up and moving around, she's a classic example of a mixed type ADHD.
Okay.
And the mixed type ADHD people are the most successful people there are. The heads of every major corporation are
Mhm.
mixed type ADHDs, and probably very few of them, if any, ever finish college, by the way. Um, so remember, these are very intelligent people and very creative people. They have no interest in high school and college. They want to
Right,
do things.
right.
And so,
Exactly. Well, thank you, Doc. I think that this is a passionate subject, and we spend a little bit more time than we normally do, but I don't like to have any time restrictions because it is so important. And I think that so many people can relate, and they have children and they have a lot of questions about dosage or what to do or meal plans. So hopefully we answered all of your questions. And if not, you can always go to questions@plattwellness.com, and Doc will answer your email directly. We also have blogs on the website as well. And again, we have a whole chapter on it in our book. And we do appreciate your time today. Doc, thank you so much.
always
I
a
always
pleasure.
even though I read your books and I hear you talking, and we blog, and there's always a little something that comes out of it. So I hope everybody enjoyed this podcast. There's always something new and exciting.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Been a
thank
pleasure.
you. Bye bye. Until next week.
Adios.
Bye bye.